Welcome, and thank you all for joining us this evening. I'm Katie Devaney, the Adult Learning Manager for the Jacksonville Public Library. And tonight we're so excited to have Frederick Joseph here to talk with us about his book, The Black Friend, on being a better white person. Before we get started, let me go over a few items. Your microphones are muted, so please put any questions or comments you have in the chat box. The last 20 minutes are for questions from you, the audience. And also it is best to view the lit chat in speaker view, okay? So as I mentioned, we are so excited to have Frederick Joseph with us tonight. Frederick Joseph is a writer and an award-winning activist and philanthropist and marketing professional. He was named to the 2019 Forbes 30 Under 30 list, is a recipient of the Bob Clampett Humanitarian Award given by the Comic-Con International San Diego, and was selected for the 2018 Route 100, an annual list of the most influential African Americans. He has written articles on race, marketing, and politics for outlets such as the New York Times, the Washington Post, Essence, the Huffington Post, and The Root. Welcome, Frederick. Our moderators for tonight are three amazing high school students from Jacksonville. Taylor Richardson, also known as Astronaut Starbright, is a student at Bolles in Jacksonville. She wants to become a doctor, scientist, and one of the first Black women to go to Mars one day. Her focus is on shining a light on inclusion and diversity through advocacy and philanthropy work. Welcome, Taylor. Our second moderator for the evening is Jakhye Wilkins. Jakhye is on the junior board for Children's International Summer Village, a nonprofit focused on teaching youth how to become global citizens. He's an aspiring doctor, lawyer, and is passionate about social justice issues, especially those impacting youth. Welcome, Jakhye. And our third moderator, Jasmine Ibrahim, moved to Jacksonville from Egypt in 2019. She is president of the Bolles Environmental Club, a competitive swimmer, and board member of the Women's March of Jacksonville. Topics that she is passionate about include youth engagement in politics, climate change, conservation, and social justice. Welcome, Jasmine. I will now turn the program over to Taylor.
Hi, everyone. I just want to say thank you, Ms. Katie, for the wonderful introductions, and thank you, Ms. Barry, at the Jacksonville Public Library for allowing us to host this event. Also, thank you to my classmates, Jakhye and Yasmeen, for joining me as co-host. And a big thank you to Mr. Joseph for allowing us to have this conversation and taking the time out of his day to join us. So with that being said, let's dive right on into some questions. Okay, one of my questions was, how did you feel learning about the success of the Black Friend Challenge, and what do public libraries mean to you personally and for your work?
Well, first and foremost, Taylor, thank you for all that you've done. And I think it's a perfect segue into the Black Friend Challenge. You know, in terms of hearing about the success, first and foremost, I wasn't surprised. I'm never surprised by anything that you're working on becoming magnificently a part of the zeitgeist of the nation, quite frankly, right? You've done magnificent work for years. So again, wasn't surprised at all. But I was honored. I was honored that you took the time out and felt so moved by the work that you thought others should get involved. And then even more so honored that people around the country, including my dear friend Travis Akers, you know, took the challenge and purchased books and shared the content, because it's not necessarily about me or even this book, but support of a movement, right? Support of what is currently a moment, but we need to turn into a systemic movement to make systemic change.
I couldn't agree more. Okay. How was the process of revisiting your own personal experiences in preparation for the book?
You know, quite frankly, it was difficult. You know, I'm someone who believes that multiple things have to be true at the same time to make change. I think that you have to talk about high-level systems such as, you know, the education system, the judicial system, healthcare system, things of that nature. But you also have to talk about the experiences and people within those systems. So to do that, I framed my own experiences in this book. And in doing so, I had to go back to some places that I hadn't been in 25 years at times. And, aspects of it were deeply cathartic, and aspects of it were difficult, right? But I think that ultimately seeing the reception to the book and understanding and knowing that it's making change has made the entire thing worth it. It's been a healing experience to watch young people like you ultimately and hopefully not have to deal with some of the things that I've dealt with, over the last few years.
Absolutely. I think we're going to have some questions from Jakhye now.
Yes, hi everyone, I'm Jakhye. First, I would like to thank Mr. Joseph for writing this book. This was absolutely awesome. It validated my experience as a Black person. I saw so much of myself from your experience. So it was very easy for me to read. I felt like I was having a conversation with someone that was just like me. And also I would like to thank Taylor for just being awesome in general. You're someone I look up to, and I'm not the only one. So just know that things that you are doing are awesome all the time, and please keep doing it. Please keep doing it because it makes things a lot easier for everyone. And okay, so my first question is, how did you go about choosing different terms and suggestions in your encyclopedia?
Well, first and foremost, Jakhye, I deeply appreciate everything you said. And as you felt validated, I feel validated in having written the book, right? Because I think, and this isn't the answer to your question yet. I'm going to get to that in 2 seconds. But I think that many people assume that the book is just for white people or it's just for young white people. But I think, a lot of the book is frankly for young people of color to feel validated that, me being much older than, many of you on here with my gray hair and whatnot, I'm letting you know this is a love letter to you. You're not alone. I've dealt with the same things. I'm reaffirming you, and we are going to get through this together, right? There is an end to that tunnel. Now, in terms of your question, I chose the terms, frankly, way after having written the book. As I was writing the book, my editor and I were going back, and she's like, I don't know if a lot of white people are going to know what this, and this means, right? Because the reality is that a lot of us have to live with certain terms on a regular basis because they're not concepts, they're not theories, they're our existence. And when that is your existence versus someone else's, oftentimes you have to explain what you're even referring to. And I don't think that that's just in regards to race. I think that's in regards to gender, that's in regards to class, and that's in regards to any oppressive system. Oftentimes, I've seen, women explaining very basic things for women to men because men have the privilege within a patriarchal system of not thinking about certain things, right? So I wanted to make sure that I wasn't condescending in creating an encyclopedia, but giving a tool rather to help the book have more context.
Okay, yeah, I definitely understand that. And for me, like, I feel like I knew all the terms in the encyclopedia because, I'm Black. So it was really easy for me to just go through and be like, oh my goodness. So it's not being a Black person really is a culture, and it really is something that we all experience, and it isn't the same, but it's very similar. So, okay, so my second question is, do you believe the United States is like in the midst of a racial reckoning right now in 2021?
That is a phenomenal question. I think that, it's very rare that I'm stumped. I think that the United States is heading towards a racial reckoning. I think that there are many things happening as we speak on this call that will decide the fate of this country for the next decade or two, quite frankly. Just being quite transparent, we see that there are forces at work that didn't even want this call to happen. So it shows that I can't necessarily speak for what the entire country is in, but I think that there are a chosen few who are actively trying to do the work. And as long as we persevere and we understand that this isn't a sprint, it's a marathon, right? And if that happens, right, if everyone on this video call right now makes a place for anti-racism, a place for anti-patriarchy, a place for anti-capitalism, a place for anti-homophobia, a place for anti-transphobia, so on and so forth, in their hearts on a daily basis, then I think that we can get to that reckoning that we're looking for.
Okay, I definitely understand. And I actually challenge everyone on this call, like you said, to be that voice for change and to actively do something in your community to make something different and make it easier for marginalized groups. So I challenge everyone on this call to do that. And we're gonna have some questions from Yasmeen now.
Thank you, Jakhye. I think your question probably gave me a really good segue, I think, in the midst of like this global like resurgence in social justice and us being at home within the last like year and just realizing and like focusing our values and just taking a time to reflect. I couldn't be more shocked on the timing of this book coming in a year where we need it the most. Was that purposeful? Was that in the plan? Did you need to speed up the process? Like, I'm in shock of how like in perfect timing this book was released. And I just kind of want to know more about that, or was that just like a coincidence?
To be frank, it takes a long time to write some books. The book was written and done about a year before 2020. It's just that a lot of people are just coming to terms with the things that many of us have been facing our entire lives. And quite frankly, I think that my book and many other books, while they have different ways of saying things, we've been saying similar things and the exact same thing in some instances since the inception of this country. So these things that I'm writing about, I had to actually go back and write a new preface just to include 2020 because the experiences sadly haven't changed much since I was your age. They haven't changed much since my mother was your age. They haven't changed much since her mother was your age. And I think that people need to really understand that. Like your question is really powerful. I want people to sit with it for a moment because it's like, okay, how did this person have the ability to write a book about 2020 before 2020?
Exactly.
Right? Because it's not about 2020. These things are not new. They're just new for some of the people here, for some of the people being introduced to this movement and this moment. So all that to say, I feel horrible actually that the book, when the book came out, that it resonated so much in certain ways, because I wish that the book was obsolete tomorrow, quite frankly, right? Like I wish that the book wasn't there. I wish that people said, you know what, we don't need this anymore because everything changed, but that's not the case.
And I think a quote that really resonated with me and kind of relates onto this whole topic was, you said, in the end, we don't need allies, we need accomplices. And I really thought that was just really powerful the way you said it in the end. And I just want to know, could you further elaborate on that, or like just explain what made you write that, or just, I don't know, it's just such an amazing quote from the book, and just thought I would share with those who are still reading or will begin to read this book.
Well, first and foremost, in terms of that concept, is actually from a book called Hood Feminism, which Mickey Kendall wrote. So I think, everyone on here, if you want to learn more about Black women and the feminist movement and womanism, you should definitely read Mickey Kendall, go read Bell Hooks, go read Angela Davis, so on and so forth. I stand on the shoulders of looking at things through a Black feminist lens because of these women. That being said, the reason why I wanted to expand on that concept and really dive into it in my book is because there's a difference between being an ally and being an accomplice, in my opinion, right? Allies are people who want the world to change. They want the right things to happen. Accomplices are in the muck with you, getting dirty to make that happen. There's trenches, and then there are the people who send people into the trenches, right? And what I need right now, while I'm in the trenches, while Taylor's in the trenches, while Jakhye's in the trenches, while you're in the trenches, I need people to get in the trenches with us, right? Because otherwise this won't change. So that chapter is all about that concept, right? And sometimes it's as simple as saying, there's something wrong happening right in front of me and I'm going to do something about it, right? And that doesn't mean you have to put your body on the line or put your career on the line. It can be as simple as saying, hey, I'm going to make a monthly donation to an organization that is making systemic change, right? $5, $10, so on and so forth. That's being an accomplice, right? That is actually being active in an anti-racist movement. Like for me, I'm someone who tries to use my platform to be an accomplice to communities that I'm not a part of. I'm like, okay, well, I can't just say I care about trans youth. I have to actually use my platform to support trans youth, right? And then I have to tell other people to do the same. And then if I have the resources, I have to use those resources to do that, and tell other people to do the same. And that's how it works, right? So that's where the concept comes from for me. It's just being active, really. Being active, using your privilege, using your resources, using your access.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that really cleared it up, and I think it's a great segue onto Taylor's question. So I think we're going to loop it back around to Taylor. So here you go.
Yeah, that was amazing, guys. I just wanted to piggyback off what Jakhye was saying about the book, how it gave such like a kindred impression. Like I saw myself in the book. I saw other kids in my book. Like many people know I go to predominantly white school, and you touched on a little bit the importance of people's names and how to pronounce them and when you say them right. And even though my name is pretty normal and kind of basic, I just saw how it felt when people would mess up their other people's names, and how it made them feel sort of invalidated who they are and their identity. So I'm glad you touched base on that, because I don't know. I just felt like it was an important topic to discuss about, even though it was kind of small. But I did want to say that my next question kind of goes into that. What was your like inspiration for writing the links in the books, like the little footnotes, like talking to the audience? Because that's what I loved about the book so much. It was so interactive and it was so fun. Like while I was reading, I was talking to myself thinking somebody was there, but it was just so interactive. And I just wanted to know, like, what was your plan, your inspiration for doing that? So.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big film buff. I love movies, and my favorite movies break the fourth wall, right? Like they actually engage with the audience and let the audience engage with them. And my theory of change when it comes to all oppression is that people are going to need to be engaged to want to change things, right? Like I didn't want to wave my finger at people. I didn't want to write a textbook. I wanted to talk about my experiences, and to do so, I wanted to talk like me. If anyone's been around me or follows me, yeah, I talk about racism. I talk about sexism. I talk about the patriarchy and all the different things. But a lot of times I'm also just watching my I have breath of humanity. I want people to see my humanity, and also see your humanity. And I think that if we can pivot from in terms of actually making systemic change.
Absolutely. I don't know. Can you guys hear us right? Well, can you guys hear us?
We can hear you. We may have, yeah, I think he just froze for a sec, but let's see if he comes back. But we're good, I think.
Does anyone else have any questions, Jakhye, Yasmeen, anything you wanted to ask him about?
Wait, hang on one second. Taylor, I think we may have lost him, so we'll have to bring him right back in. So that's okay. But
Zoom call without technical difficulties.
this is okay. So let me ask you, is he coming back? We'll get him back in 1 second, everyone. So Taylor, and you may have just shared it, and I apologize if I missed you sharing this because I was like watching, trying to bring the folks in. But did you touch on how you had shared the book with your different classmates and with your different friends, and how you kind of got that little movement going?
No, not yet.
Okay, why don't you talk a little bit about that for just a second? We'll bump that up to right now. Okay.
Oh yeah. So currently, we've raised over $24,000 for the book. It's been distributed in high schools, 40 U.S. embassies, many other organizations, 40 states, and things like that. So I started the Black Friend project because I really felt connected to the book in a certain way, and I felt like other kids needed to read it in order to guide them and sort of feel the same things that I felt. So I made sure all the kids could have it in public libraries, because that's where I started reading that's where our mom took me when I was little because we couldn't afford to buy books. So she would take me there and she would help me read because my reading level wasn't that high. So I figured if it was distributed there, other kids can read it too. So that's how it started.
It's beautiful. That's fantastic. And that's the way you do it. Just a quick and simple grass movement. And I know that you guys have all talked a little bit about, I guess I don't want to jump ahead on what you might be talking though in the future. So I don't want to jump into something that you may have already read. Oh, hang on one sec. I think we got him back. He's back. He should be back with us. So Fred, can you hear us?
I can.
Beautiful.
No one get Verizon internet.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say the storms have been going up and down the coast. So I was going to try to do a little Mother Nature maybe with it and just say it could have been something with the satellites, but cool. Okay, so I'll let them continue. We were just chatting with Taylor a little bit about how she got the books out to everyone.
Okay, so back to business. I was wondering if you could touch on, like, you had a chapter in the book about like certain experiments and you did one with music. And I was wondering if you could expand more on like the music industry and why some people know certain songs and why other people don't. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me make sure, Taylor, you can hear me. Everybody, everything's good?
You're good.
All right. Cool. So we live in a country and generally in a world where the things that are centered oftentimes reflect the people who own the entertainment stations, right? Own the radio, own the studios, own the television stations, so on and so forth. And in America, most of those people who own these places and produce the content tend to be white oftentimes, right? And therefore, much of the content centers them, their experience and perspective. So we grew up, most of us, having to have almost a dual existence in terms of the things we're familiar with because of that, right? Like you're watching the CW and you're seeing a white experience such as Dawson's Creek or Felicity and all these different things because these are reflective of certain people's white experiences. But what happens is because we don't necessarily, we being non-white people, don't have the same access more times than not, you're not getting the same breadth of experience and representation for us, which is why moments such as Crazy Rich Asians or Black Panther are so important. Hidden Figures, like with your Hidden Figures Challenge and whatnot, are so important because we're not getting that. But in not getting that, we're seeing things in our own representation within our pockets, right? Within our local communities and whatever content being made and distributed amongst us, while also learning and having large content distributed to us from this other community, which again is the overarching community of the country. But they're not getting to do the same, right? Like they're not having to see their content, hear their stories, watch, their lives and ours, which is why when you start asking questions of many people, they're like, yeah, I've never heard of this Black artist. I've never heard of, this Southeast Asian artist. I've never heard of this Japanese artist. And that has systemic impact on how people actually view people from those communities because they're not familiar with their stories, language, or humanity.
Interesting. I'm glad you expanded on that. That was cool. Because when I was reading it, I was like, wow, I didn't really realize that, I know all of their songs, but they don't really know like songs in our culture and things like that. So cool. I guess does anyone else, Yasmeen, Jakhye, do you have a specific question or talking point you want to ask him before I go into?
Yes.
Okay.
Kind of expanding on the format of the book, you have conversations featuring 14 amazing leaders of change, authors, just like all around incredible people. And I was wondering, like, in terms of the format of the book, when you kind of interview people and have their perspective on race, culture, like ethnicity, and all these important topics, how difficult was it to, kind of narrow it down or expand or just like, I don't know. I just think it's so different than any other book that we read, because it's basically, I don't know, it just feels like you mentioned, like I'm in the story. I'm right there with it. Was that kind of what you wanted with these conversations? Kind of just if you could talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, that was the goal. You know, I had a few things in mind when writing the book. I wanted people to get an experience. I didn't want it to just be like, okay, racism bad, non-racism good. I wanted people to actually feel like, you know what? I learned something. I have music to listen to. I have new people to follow. I want it to be a real experience, especially one that young people would find accessible and fun. So that being said, I found some of the most brilliant people that I knew, and I just had conversations with them, quite frankly. The other aspect of bringing other people into the book is when you're talking about something like race, something like gender, something like class, you have to understand that these are very intersectional conversations, right? I am a cisgender, heterosexual Black man, and I have that one experience, right? I've lived in both poverty and I've lived with privilege and access, and those are my experiences. I'm not a Black woman. I'm not a Chicano. I'm not Southeast Asian. I can't speak for them. So why not just ask them to speak for themselves, right? Don't create an echo chamber. If you can, create something that's inclusive and gives access and platform to others. I think that's the real work that we all need to be doing at all time, is how we make space for other people and their experiences. So I wanted to do that in real time with the book.
Thank you so much. Yeah, just a little bit of like context for me. I don't really know where I'm from in terms of just like having family. My family's from all over the world. And I feel like this book was kind of a place of refuge in terms of, wow, like I get what's going on. I think maybe Jakhye and Taylor and many others feel the same way. It's like, you can always find a little piece of like something that relates to you, like being Hispanic, but also being Middle Eastern, but also being like in a place of privilege, but also just seeing the world around you in a different light. I cannot thank you enough for this book. And I also cannot thank like all of you enough for just being a part of this conversation. So if Jakhye or Taylor want to continue the conversation with another question, you guys I pass the torch.
Okay, so I'm a third-year Mandarin student at my high school. It is one of my favorite classes, even though it's one of the hardest for me because I'm an English speaker. I'm not too great at figuring out how to speak Chinese. It is not the easiest language. And with my teacher, we have quite recently been discussing the race relations between Asian people, white people, and Black people, and how quite recently she's, after the shootings in Atlanta, targeted towards Asian women, and now she's been living here for 30 years, but she was raised in China. Now she has to look around and she has to be aware of her surroundings, because she knows that even though she's been here for a long time and she is an American, that it's not safe for her because there are people out there who want to hurt Asian people. So, and I really like how I've been seeing Black Lives Matter and Stop Asian Hate collaborating. And I really want to know from your perspective, how do Asian people and Black people, or just any groups of people, how do we join together and be accomplices? And how do we collaborate with one another to make change go faster? Because I feel like if we work together, a lot more is going to be done a lot faster. So what do you think are some points that we need to focus on to collaborate?
I mean, Jakhye, you're 100% right? Like anyone facing any oppression will defeat their oppressors quicker if they work together, and that's just always been the case. And I think that is at the center of someone like Fred Hampton's work. You know, Fred Hampton was someone who said, okay, our real issue is classism, our real issue is militarism, so on and so forth. And it said, whether you are poor and white, poor and Latinx, poor and Black, we all need to come together and understand the commonality and how to liberate each other, right? And I think that that's the moment that we're in now, especially as it relates to the AAPI community, the Black community, and some of the white supremacy that they're facing, and ingrained white supremacy, because, you know, it's not as simple as, oh, we have issues with each other, white people have issues with us. No, there's a lot of conditioning, generational trauma within these communities for things that they've done to each other. And that's the honest truth of the matter. So I think the first thing that we need to do as oppressed communities is unpack that trauma, right? Have honest conversations about how we're feeling about the things that we've been through in relation to each other. And after unpacking that, figure out how we move forward, right? How do we move forward together? Because again, we have common issues in that ultimately we are all oppressed under the same exact systems. It's like, the analogy I use or metaphor is oftentimes we're all fighting over a slice of pizza while someone else has a whole pie, right? And that's the reality of this fight, not just, because again, it's not even just a race fight. It's a gender fight. It's a class fight. It's an age fight. It's an ableism fight. All of us are trying to lift our communities, and we will lift even more. We'll lift farther, go further, faster with one another, and having an intersectional lens on all of our work.
Thank you. I think the collaboration between different people groups and different minorities in the United States is really what's going to facilitate lasting change and a lasting shift in our culture in general that I think is needed and has been needed for generations. And Taylor, I think I'm going to give it back to you.
Yeah.
And okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to say, I know we keep saying it, but I just appreciate you so much for writing the book. Like, sometimes I have a hard time articulating it, but my level of respect and love and support for you for writing this book is so high. And I just want to thank you a lot for giving not only yourself a chance, but other people of color and other minorities a chance to use their voice and amplify it. So dive on to the next question. Why did you choose to write this book for young adults and teens, and what do you hope that they take from it? And are you planning to write about anything in the future?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, if you can learn to disrespect somebody as early as 8, 9, 10 years old, then you can also learn to respect someone, right? And that's at the very baseline of why I wrote the book, to be accessible for younger people as well. It's funny because I've seen that a lot of educators and parents have received the book first. They're reading it before their kids, and they're the most receptive to it, because I think many of these conversations, frankly, a lot of adults have never even had or unpacked, right? Both white adults and non-white. You know, for people who are non-white, they are now going back and navigating things that they went through when they were 13, 14, 20, 21, 25, 18. And for white adults, they're like, you know what? When I was in high school, did I do that? When I was in elementary school and middle school, did I do that? Educators are saying, wait a minute, how do I look at my Black students? What are my assumptions? And these are all the conversations that I wanted to make accessible. And to make them accessible, right, you had to write something that was inherently accessible. There's no reason why you shouldn't read something and have a conversation with your educators, which is what's happening, right? You know, it's not, you shouldn't just start talking about racism, white supremacy, and oppressive issues when you get to a certain age, right? Like, you shouldn't be 18, 20 years old and just starting it there. That doesn't make any sense. And most of the work, I think, needs to be done younger, because there's less work to do then. So that's why I wanted to write it for a YA audience.
Absolutely. I do think there's just a basic lack of respect for some people, and I'm glad you touched bases on that in the book. So yeah, I don't know if we're opening it for questions. Miss Katie, I'm going to turn it over to you. Is that the time now?
We can. I could do the questions that people have put in. I just want to make sure. Is everybody done? Jasmine, Jakhye, you guys are good? Or okay. All right. Well, so we're going to take first two questions that we had written in ahead of time. So the first one was from Melody, and she asked if you want to know about, did you self-publish your first book? And she wants to know how you got that first book published. She's a budding author, and I want some inspiration from you.
Yeah, no, I didn't self-publish. Wait, was this? I didn't self-publish, and how I got the book published.
Yes.
I don't really know how the entire publishing machine works necessarily. I think most people, even within publishing, are figuring that out. But you know, if she's ever interested, please feel free to give her my contact. I'll connect her to my editor and my agent. But it's an entire beast. I just write the proposals and send them over, to be quite frank with you.
Well, that's the way it should be done. Work through others. Very good. So, okay. So our second one comes from Dave. And he kind of said he has many questions, but he's going to limit to one very broad question for you. He'd love to have an in-depth conversation, but knows that's not possible with our time frame. So he says, thank you for writing the book and being willing to put yourself out there. Everything contributes to this discussion. His question is, if it is true, and this truth may be debated, that we are inching our way toward a more equitable society, at what point or what has to happen before we can say we have reached it, given, as it seems to be the case, that there will always be outliers, exceptions, bad behavior, mistakes, and so forth? And when can we say we've done it and cease grouping people as deserving, not deserving, oppressive, or not oppressive, and let simple civility take over? In other words, I'll respect you to the extent you respect me, or I may respect you without regard to whether you respect me or not, out of the same or a higher civility, and move this to an individual instead of a group level. Thank you. It's a little long. Would you like me to repeat any? Or
I think I caught all of it though. So my answer to first and foremost, structures and systems are important, right? So long as we have the structures and systems in place that oppress people, it's hard to focus on anything else. And that's how you actually start trending towards equity, right? If I can't get a house, let's say, and this is the case, this has been the case at points in my life, if I can't get a house because there are no agents that want to show me a house, that's both a structural level and an individual level, because they're like, oh, I don't want to show a Black man a house in this neighborhood, right? So again, you have to have many things take place for something like that to be different. You have to have accountability of the individual. You have to have legislation to stop the act of the industry. And then you have to have equity in terms of the things that I'm allowed to or forced to be able to see, right? Just as one example, right? And there are many things that have happened that allow for things like this to persist. So, you know, even in all that to say, even in homogenous or primarily homogenous nations, we still see inequity even in those places. So I don't know that we'll ever get at a point of perfection, but I don't think anyone's striving for perfection. I think that we're striving for people to strive, right? I think we're striving for the constant pursuit of better. And that's what's important, right? We're trying to level the playing field and then allow everyone to equally pursue being better in the exact same way. It doesn't mean that anyone is going to ever be perfect, but if we want to be able to focus on civility between individuals, we first need to overhaul and restructure and reconstruct many of our systems.
Yep. Well said. We have, before a question, I want to put a little comments. Linnell says, not a question, but a statement. I find your words, empathy starts with understanding, inspiring. So from when you were talking earlier, so that was really nice. Okay. And hope to everybody bear with me as we were talking before. Folks didn't know that, Frederick, we were all talking about having to wear our glasses and having trouble reading from a distance. So, okay. So our next one is, somebody said, thank you to the Jacksonville Public Library and our three brilliant hosts, and of course, Fred, for hosting this discussion. Their question is, we share so many friends, including several of those you interviewed in the Black Friend. Which person that you interviewed had the biggest impact on you personally? And did any of the responses you received during the interviews change any of your ideology or perspective?
Interesting. I'm trying to think of who could have mutual friends with me. I think I know who might have asked that. That being said, I think I don't know if any of my ideologies changed necessarily. I think my hope did. Right. I felt pretty hopeless going into the publishing of this book. Right. Not the writing of it, but the actual release of it. And it was conversations with a few people after the release who were in the book, where they were like, the reason I wanted to do this with you is because I knew that this theory of change that you had in this book would actually work, and we see it working. So I think just kind of naming names, some of the people who were just brilliant within the book, everyone, but specifically, Syra Rao was absolutely brilliant. Angie Thomas just always has a way with words, literally. I'm trying to think. April Rain was great. I mean, everybody was great. And I wish that I could have literally put out the transcripts of our entire conversations. Maybe I should do that at some point, actually.
Book two.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Question from Tim is, was there a story or memory you wanted to include the book, but that ultimately didn't make the final version?
It's interesting because, the book is not a memoir, but it has memoir aspects to it. And there were things that I left out. I'm currently working on 2 other books right now. So I held some things in as I think that they relate more to specifically patriarchy, some things relating specifically to gun violence and things of that nature that I'm diving into in my next bodies of work.
Good. Someone says, could you talk about the age requirements for your book? What age do you recommend for those to read?
To be quite frank with you, I've seen some people read the book with their 10-year-olds. And I think there was one educator who said my 8-year-olds are reading it. There was a 5th grade class. How old are you in 5th grade? I have no idea.
I'm not sure either.
There was a class of 5th graders who read the book and they did an entire project on it. So I think it depends upon many things. It depends upon the work that's been done on an individual and personal level with a child as they were growing up. It depends upon how much you're willing to work with that child and explain concepts, right? But I do think that the baseline reading level is about a 12-year-old.
Okay. Paula says, one thing I loved about the book was meeting your friends, and they would love to know whether Cynthia and Carlos have kick-ass kids.
Everyone's been asking me that question. They are together still. They don't have a child yet, but that might be changing soon. So,
oops, sorry, I was trying to move my little cursor down and it went below my page. Oh, come on. Oh, I apologize. It's a technical day here today. Oh, this was great. I think we actually have a class, actually, possibly from Bolles, that is watching, like the whole group of students. And this is from a 6th grader. They're asking, do you have plans to write children's books or more young adult books?
So it's funny, before this book and the 2 deals I just signed, my entire goal was to write nothing but children's books. So when I finished the next 2 books, I'm actually going to dive back into more middle grade and children's work. I had something I was actively working on called Nova. So, look for that book. It's a trilogy for middle grade readers and things like that. So look for that in the next few years.
Cool. The next one is a question about how does one add this book as required reading? And do you think your book should be required reading? And I am going to just throw out real quick before you answer that your publishers did send us 2 links we are adding in our thank you note to everybody if they are an educator of how they can use the little worksheets and the questions that you created for the book. So I'll just throw that out.
Yeah, I mean, I think that based on the reception to even this evening, it shows that the book probably should be required reading, right? When, someone said to me, when there's so much vitriol to stop change, it means that the change that you're making is really working. So, I think Taylor and Jakhye and Yasmeen have proven that young people need this, quite frankly. And I think we all need it. I think that every one of us is learning, healing, and growing from this work. So yes, in short, absolutely. And then how to make it required reading, it depends on where you are. I guess it depends on the district.
True.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me say, Hope says, I am impressed with the courage consistently shown by Taylor in the face of racism that has tried to shut her down, though it has not worked. Yes. So what advice can you, Fred, offer up to the young people stepping into uncomfortable truths for everyone to reach liberation?
I think just be unapologetically yourself. I'm not one to dictate to young people, because I think young people are doing a better job than anybody else, quite frankly. Every day I'm learning from the youngest people in my family, the young people around me. I said on Twitter today, and I really meant it from the bottom of my heart, Taylor is one of my role models. Taylor gave me the courage in many instances that, when I've had death threats and all sorts of things happened to me this week, but and I didn't want to get out of bed. But if Taylor's going to go out there as a young person, still in high school, a young Black woman, and combat this every single day, then I need to also. I can also. So all that to say, you have to look to young people, look to your fellow young people, look to young people of tomorrow who are making the change today.
Yeah. LT says, Mr. Joseph, what advice do you have for white majority friends or minority or underrepresented individuals? How do we bring up difficult topics without seeming like we want our friends to do the work for us or coming across as tokenism?
I would say just have real conversations, right? Like it's, one of the things that people don't do well, my friends, my family, me and my fiance have been guilty of this before. Talk to each other, right? Like, tell people what you're trying to do. Like, instead of, beating around the bush, say like, hey, I don't want to lean into problematic behaviors. This is the work that I'm trying to do. How can I be of service? How can I create access? How can I do certain things without, taking a toll on you, without doing all these things? What do you need before you give me anything that I need, right? Like have those conversations, because people have to realize everyone's cup is only but so much full. If you're not pouring into anyone's cup, how are they going to pour out of theirs constantly for you?
Exactly. Okay, so this one says, there's been so much negativity and close-mindedness surrounding the title of the book. In order to attract more readers, was there any discussions prior to publication to consider a different name? Ooh.
No. No, not at all. Not in the slightest. I don't dance if there's no music on, and I don't mince my words. I said what I said, right? And there are 100 and something people on here right now who are interested in this book, interested in this conversation. And there have been hundreds of thousands of people who have read the book to this point. I don't know that the book is ever going to be in every school in America. I don't know if the book is ever going to be in schools around the world, but whether that happens or not, I know that change was made. And if we're being direct, if someone wrote a book, How to Be a Better Cisgender Heterosexual Man, I will be the first in line to get that book, because that's exactly what I'm trying to do.
Very good. Have you ever thought about writing a book regarding the Afro-Latino population here in the States?
It's interesting. Someone must have done some research on some of my background, I suppose. I not exclusively. I've considered writing a book that's inclusive of that, and I think in some of my own personal story, in more of a memoir-esque book eventually, but not exclusively. And right now I'm working on 2 very specific books that touch on certain aspects of that conversation.
Very good. Speaking of this as required reading, Patricia says, I think it would be great, though my fear here in Jacksonville would be white parents objecting to it. And I don't know if you know, they're in the process of possibly renaming some of the high schools here, to give you a little background on this. She says, look at the situation with renaming Robert E. Lee High School. Any ideas on how to introduce it to a school board to encourage its acceptance?
I mean, quite frankly, tell people to read it, right? Tell people to read it. And if you read the book, I think you would have trouble pushing back against that book. Anyone who is against racism and reads this book and has an issue with it, then you aren't truly against racism. And that's just the direct truth. But the reality of it is that everyone is saying Black Lives Matter now. You see Black Lives Matter being sent in emails from Hulu and Netflix and McDonald's and all these things. But I remember just 5 years ago, people said Black Lives Matter was a terrible slogan, and that it was akin to hate, right? And I remember before that, when people said that Jim Crow needed to stay, and defeating Jim Crow never happened. And I wasn't around for that, but I wasn't around for this either. There was a point where people said that slavery was absolutely a must and that there was no way to defeat it. So, you know, it's up to people to have the courage and conviction to stand by those who are doing the work and do the work themselves, even if it's in the form of a book.
Exactly. And thank you. A couple people reminded us that the school board was given a copy of the book, and the DCPS school and the superintendents and everyone did receive a copy of your book. Thank you, Taylor, for having that. You know, she was the one pushing all that through to everyone. Patricia says, but we don't want to have people who aren't against racism read it to break through to them. How to encourage that? But don't we want to have people who aren't against racism read it to break through to them? How to encourage that? I think it's just everybody.
Yeah, so it's an interesting point. And after this, I have a question of my own actually that I want to ask Taylor. But it's an interesting point in that, you know, one of the conversations I've had with myself recently about the patriarchy and kind of doing the work of misogyny and things like that in my friend groups and family and other groups is, at what point do we decide to pour from those cups that I mentioned before in the actual communities that need to be served, right? In the actual communities that need support, as opposed to constantly pouring into people who aren't trying to do the work, right? There's only but so many conversations we can have with groups of people who are trying to uphold white supremacy, for example, right? I can tell you right now, there's not enough conversations about supporting Black trans women, for example. So instead of using that energy that you have, those resources that you have when trying to get your racist uncle or your racist cousin to not racist, then why don't you go pour some of your anti-racism and anti-racist resources and all that energy you have in a place where people need you, in a place where people are trying to do the work.
Yep. So did you want to ask Taylor something?
Yeah, I did. So, you know, one thing that's not lost on me is just how much work Taylor has been doing, not just in regards to this book, but just everything. You know, Taylor knows I'm a huge fan, and you know, I never wanted to go unnoticed what a young Black woman especially has accomplished, how talented she is, so on and so forth. So Taylor, I was having this conversation with my co-author, who happens to be my fiance, for my next YA book, which is called Better Than We Found It. And Better Than We Found It is essentially a follow-up to The Black Friend, but it's much more of a broad progressive manifesto. We're talking about gun violence, we're talking about ableism, we're talking about healthcare, and trying to help young people understand how to be engaged, how to change the world around them, what needs changing, what the high level topics mean. And we were like, okay, so we have all these amazing voices in the book. You know, we have Nick Stone, we have my dear friend Brandon Wolf, we have you know, my righteous fight leader Elizabeth Warren's in the book, so on and so forth. Just these great people. And I said, well, why don't we have a foreword from someone who is a young person who is actively doing the work in the community? So my question for you, Taylor, is will you write the foreword for my next YA book, Better Than We Found It?
Of course. honored to help you write it. Yeah, all those topics I think are definitely important. There's a lot of things we don't learn in school and stuff, so I would be so happy to be a part of it. Thank you for asking.
Yes, I am more than honored to have you. So that obviously means that you're going to be paid by my author, and I'm going to also pay you as well for your time in writing that foreword. And your name will be placed on the cover of the book along with myself and Portia, who are the authors. So that's going to be amazing to see. Thank you.
That's so sweet. I would be honored to just have anything with your name on it. My level of respect and love for you is so high. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, that's fantastic. Right here in Jacksonville. Yay. So I'm going to go around. They don't even know it, but before we end, I do want to go around one more time just to see if, Taylor and Jakhye and Yasmeen want to go ahead and give either, a little word of advice if you want from yourself, say one more thing to Fred or however you want to do it. So we'll start with Taylor and then we'll just go in the same order we went from before.
I don't really have anything, but I just want to thank everyone for joining the call today to learn more about the book and learn how to be a better white person, or if you're a minority person, just to see what we're talking about and have a great discussion. So I just want to thank everyone for coming. And yeah.
I would like to thank everyone for coming as well. This was a great experience for me. Definitely a cornerstone in my coming up and becoming a Black man. So thank you everyone for showing up. And again, I would like to remind you that I'm challenging everyone to go out in your community, even in the midst of COVID, find a way to make change in your community and make it better for marginalized groups. So yes, and thank you everyone.
Thank you so much, Mr. Joseph, for taking the time to speak with us and to speak with me and just all of us all around. This book has just been something that I can't put down and can serve as a reminder of how much hope we still have in this world today. So I'd like to thank Jakhye and Taylor for just welcoming me with open arms and for me to be a part of this discussion. But also thank you again, Mr. Joseph, for speaking with us today.
Well, I just wanted to say again, thank you to everyone who's here. Thank you, obviously, to Taylor and Yasmeen and Jakhye. Thank you to Katie and the entire Jacksonville Public Library, not just for hosting the event, but having courage, right? Having moral courage to get out there and do what's right in the face of adversity. And again, I said this earlier, major thank you also to my brother, Travis Akers, for doing so much promotion, especially in his locality of Jacksonville. What is it? How's it go? Duval.
Well, oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much, Frederick. We'll have to get you here, hopefully in person next year, maybe back when you have your next book out too, would be absolutely wonderful. And yeah. And I'll tell you,
you'll have to do that. Taylor's gonna be a
that's
part
right.
of the book. So now you have to,
exactly.
Yeah, I gotta come down there.
So we're gonna book you, yeah. Exactly. It'd be absolutely wonderful. And I want to thank these three incredible moderators. Jakhye, Taylor, Yasmeen, the three of you I met you for the first time the other night, and I knew then I was meeting three incredible young people, and you just double proved that this evening. And I think we have not heard the last of it from the three of you. Your name, we will hear more from the three of you, I know, in the future. And I can't thank you enough for doing this for us. And I want to thank everyone who joined us this evening, especially. And, continue, like Jakhye said, to get out there and do what we need to do in our own communities. Everything starts, I'm a big believer in grassroots, so I think everything starts small and spreads out. And I do want to invite everyone to, if you'd like, and you like the Lit Chat series, we do have one at the beginning of April on April, I forget my date, 5th, with a poet. So a local poet, Tiffany Mellinson. So that is kind of exciting for us too. So thank you all. It's been a pleasure. It's been an absolute pleasure, Frederick. It's been an absolute pleasure to all of my moderators. And we hope to see you all again at the library. Thank you.
Everyone have a good night.
Bye.